Okay, so I normally don't do videos on Friday, but today I just had to come out and talk to you guys about one because uh, probably in the last century, we've had really two important cases go up about trust taxes, and both of them kind of had major events today. The other one we talked about earlier this week, it was the Kasner decision, and the Supreme Court sided against the state of North Carolina. And basically, you can't just use a beneficiary as a reason why you're going to tax a trust. The other one is in Minnesota. It's coming on more closer to us. It's the Fielding case. And today, the Supreme Court decided they're not going to hear it. They're going to let the Minnesota Supreme Court's decision stand. And that was also in line with the taxpayer. One of the things you got to remember here is what we're basically talking about here is jurisdiction. When can you be taxed? Okay. And some of the theory behind this is, corporations are people. We've got that pretty well established. They have their rights. Well, trusts are people too. And give you kind of an analogy of what's been talked about in these cases is who from this corporation or who from this trust makes that trust living here enough for us to tax. And the beneficiary question in Kasner would be kind of like saying the same thing of just because we have a shareholder, someone who owns part of what's in this trust and can benefit from it, just because a shareholder lives in Minnesota, a shareholder lives in North Carolina, some say that's enough. Now we're going to treat you as being in this state and we're going to tax everything. We'd never do that for corporations, but we're kind of thinking that's okay to do for trusts. Minnesota also does that if at the time of the trust becoming irrevocable, if the settlor, the person who made it, that means the founder, the organizer of the corporation, made it and they were in Minnesota, we're going to tax it forever. I don't care if it moves. I don't care if it goes anywhere else. You could pack up and reincorporate in Ireland. We're still taxing everything. That's the theory behind a lot of what Minnesota's taxation of trust is about. And that's what Fielding kind of challenged. It was like, hey, we don't think because we have people all over the place that you should be able to tax everything. The people in Minnesota that could get some of this money aren't even going to get it all. Why can you tax everything just because of that? And the Minnesota Supreme Court said, yeah, you're right. In that kind of case, that's not right. That's unconstitutional. And that's kind of what's sitting there. And what this means is that if you're in one of those positions and you had one of those trusts and Minnesota taxed it forever and your trustee's not in Minnesota, and whether you have beneficiaries in Minnesota or not, you should go talk to your accountant and say, hey, should I ask for a refund anyway? Make Minnesota tell me no. Make them tell me how I'm different from these folks. And then kind of go from there because you might be owed substantial refund. Going forward, you should be thinking that as well. Why should I have a trustee in the state of Minnesota if I'm going to put a lot of money in there? I don't want Minnesota to be able to tax it. You put it in a state like South Dakota or Nevada, there won't be state level income taxes, period, on it. Think about that. They don't tax the trust income. And while a trust's income tax rate at the federal level is higher than individual tax rates, is it higher than an individual's Minnesota tax rate plus their federal tax rate? Probably not. I mean, we have a pretty high tax rate in this state. So you could save a lot of money putting it over there, and there could be no state level taxation on a lot of the income that goes through. Now, there are some things that are unequivocally always going to be taxed. If it owns shares in a Minnesota corporation, the income that person made, that's from Minnesota. They can, no question, tax that. The question becomes if it's just securities, if it's bonds, if it's businesses in different states, can Minnesota tax that? And the Minnesota Supreme Court said, I don't care where the settlor is. I don't care where the beneficiary is. I want to know, is the trustee, I don't care if the trustee has Minnesota advisors. Is the trustee in Minnesota? Are they taking advantage of Minnesota law and being protected in some way? That means they should rightfully have to pay tax. That's probably a good analysis even for a corporation. Minnesota Supreme Court said, yeah, you need that stuff. And in the Fielding case, they didn't have it. Very few trustees out of state are going to meet that demand, meet that level. So you probably should be thinking about putting trusts in different states because at worst, you got to pay Minnesota tax. That's no different. At best, you get out of paying the state level tax. Minnesota's going to have to change its law probably because they're not going to want to let it just sit here. So if you feel strongly about this, reach out to your legislator, okay? Make sure when they draft the law and position, they don't try to get, a little creative with it, try to pull things back in. Make them deal with the spirit of it if you feel strongly about it. But either way, we've got a lot of different laws in other states, whether it's community property law, whether it's asset protection law, that make a lot of sense to put trusts in other states. And now you might have a tax benefit for it. You should really look at this kind of analysis. The law is going to change, but the law still has to meet that standard. And so there's probably going to be a lot of people who have the option to put trusts in other states and not pay. Should be put in the other state anyway for the asset protection of the features. Now, you could have a tax benefit too. And if you don't, you're in the same position. And we probably should still have fully discretionary trusts. Don't let that beneficiary be able to demand money at any time. Make it an ask and make it not guaranteed. That way they don't have control over it, because the Supreme Court in Kashner left that open. So make fully discretionary trusts and really think about putting trustees in other states, especially if you can take advantage of special features. You might have significant tax benefits from that now too. So watch what the legislature is doing. Talk to them about it. File those protective filings. Go ask for refunds under the current law if you think you might fit this kind of situation. Seek out your accountant and your lawyer's advice. They really should have been following this, and be ready for that, because a lot of things are going to change now. There's going to be a lot of tax planning opportunities, and you should do that stuff now rather than later. What's the worst that can happen? You're going to have to pay Minnesota tax anyway. There's probably another benefit. What's the best thing that could happen? You can save tax and get those benefits.